Hello there, everybody. Sheehan here with another episode of the Sheehan Show for Sherdog.com. And I had to come on today and talk about the mad weekend in the world of Irish mixed martial arts. I suppose, Sherdog and myself and my friends over at obviously Severe MMA have a kind of partner to talk about Irish MMA over the last few years. And I had to take this opportunity to come on and talk about it because this is literally the biggest weekend in Irish mixed martial arts in years. You know, we've had obviously big Conor McGregor fights and everything like that, but everything on these shores have really been shut down. There was a Cage Legacy card a couple of weeks ago, a local MMA organisation which do great things, and which, you know, Peter Queally, who we saw at the weekend, has fought on and things like that. But this was the first major Irish MMA show since Bellator back in, it feels like 10 years ago, at the start of 2020, when they had the card in the same arena, in the Point Depot 3 arena. And just from my perspective, I suppose I'll start with that, and we'll get a little bit into the fights and the results and stuff. But I want to talk about this from more, the perspective of someone who's been there after not being there for a while. And it was fantastic. Let's be honest, it was great. Look, it was great just to get out of the house. I suppose I've joked a couple of times this week. But to be back in... so the restrictions in Ireland just lifted, I think, on the 22nd of October, where you can have indoor events like this with no limits on capacity. You can have a full, I think even outdoors, there was still limits on capacity up until 2 weeks ago. So this is really, I think maybe the second or third big event like this, maybe even the first, I'm not sure, but one of the first few back, which is an event that you can go and you can get a ticket to, and you could sit there with 9,000 people and you could scream and roar and enjoy it. It was the first one. Obviously sitting there in press row, I'm not doing that, but to be in there in that crowd, to be back to a little bit of normality was just absolutely fantastic. And then from an Irish MMA perspective, to see the sport kind of get back, to get back to life was absolutely fantastic. Now we can get to the results and we can get to all of that in a second, but that was the main story. That was the main part of the weekend, to see Irish MMA back on its feet, because Irish MMA, it's had a very, very tough time, and a lot of people listening to this maybe don't know the story, or maybe don't know what has happened over the years. But I'll get briefly, I can't go into complete detail here now, but so Conor McGregor came up. There was a good scene, good gyms like Team Rhino and Rodney Moore up the north, and SBG, and down in Clarke in the south of the country they have Liam O'Griffin and different people. Great, Andy Ryan, as I mentioned, Team Rhino, and loads of different people, Barry Oglesby and John Kavanagh. All great gyms. And in the rise of Conor McGregor, as we know, and the rise of the likes of Chris Fields winning the Cage Warriors belt before that, and Cathal Pendred after McGregor, and Neil Seary, and it just all came up. McGregor rose the whole scene up to become a place where they put McGregor versus Brandao tickets on sale, and they could have sold out probably 50 grand. They were talking about Croke Park, which is 82,000 people for a McGregor fight. That's how big it got. It was absolutely massive. And then, McGregor went off and he did his stuff away from Ireland, and, the fans followed him. But in the Irish scene itself, the Cage Warriors cards came here, local shows were kind of popping up in and out, and they had been there for years. But then there was the death of Joe Carvalho, which obviously we've talked about lots over the years, and the scene kind of stopped for a good while, and it's never come back fully. Cage Legacy, as I mentioned earlier, have done great shows. Cage Warriors have come back, Bellator have come back, but it's been very, very tough for the scene, and the scene has struggled through and produced fighters like, James Gallagher and Ian Garry and others, which I will mention in a while. So it's been a very, very tough time. That death of Joe Carvalho brought a lot of pressure on people who maybe have never experienced stuff like that before, and who were put into a limelight of trying to get an organisation to a point where, or a sport even, to a point where everyone kind of believes it and everyone wants to get it to the next level and to be an actual sport and recognise them. We're still not there. MMA is not a recognised sport in Ireland. It's still looking for government backing and all of that. So that's kind of a brief story of where Irish MMA has been. Now McGregor has kind of, obviously had these issues outside of the cage, inside of the cage as well, not being his best run over the last few years, and a lot of the fan base has fallen off. But what we saw on Friday night is the fans from down back through the years, so we're always MMA fans, but the fans that Conor McGregor brought in who are still there. you know, who are still real fans, who are not just there for the McGregor fight nights, who are not just there for the piss up in Las Vegas. They're real fans who were there, and they were educated fans. You could see, you know, there was a transition to my, you know, you're close to getting an armbar, and the crowd were like, you know, they're shouting for, you know, a transition from had the half guard into the side control, things like that. There was big shouts. One of the most well-educated crowds I've ever seen. It was absolutely fantastic. It was brilliant to see. So the scene has been through a tough time, but what it has produced is a huge fan base with fans that are insane. You know, I think everyone listening to this, so I suppose most people listening to this probably wouldn't have been there. I'm sure there's some listening who are here on Friday night, but you can get a sense of it on TV. But being there live, it's just crazy. And I think it's been those years of, you know, lots of things happening, I suppose, in good ways and bad ways, that have produced this fan base who are fervent and educated and just brilliant. You know, even me there, I was meeting people around saying, you know, love the work on Sherdog and Severe MMA and different things. The Irish MMA scene is a very interesting, very, very interesting thing, because it is kind of it's like spring up from nowhere, like an Icelandic fucking lake around the volcano with these you know, it's lasted. It has lasted in a way that, like, it was never going to last in a way where there was 80,000 people filling out Croke Park for Peter Queally or a James Gallagher fight, but it's lasted in a way where there is that fan base that has been built, and people have grown to love MMA, and not just Conor McGregor, and that is absolutely fantastic. Now, one worry I have, and I spoke about this over in the Severe MMA podcast as well, in maybe larger depth, and maybe it's a better conversation for there where it's purely Irish. The media scene wasn't as big as it previously once was, and maybe that's because of McGregor, you know, not being on the card and not being around, but we had a Bellator title fight on this, and the radio stations here, the TV, apart from the TV channel where it's on, didn't cover it. You know, there was no coverage of it. I think one newspaper came to the media day on the weigh-in morning. Only one outlet covered it. It was myself for Severe MMA with my friend Queally. No one else. You know, the TV station that it was on covered it, and Bellator were obviously there, but no one else. So that's insane. You know, I think everyone knows Ari Hilwani over in the MMA Hour always talks about the great Irish MMA scene with all the people covering it. And there's been some fantastic journalists down the years, but a lot of people have kind of fallen out of the sport, or covering it kind of part-time, or, you know, not fully in it anymore, or you know, it hasn't produced maybe the next level of guys. Now, some people are working different things, absolutely. You know, it's tough to go on a Wednesday morning as well, but for there to be kind of, you know, no one there apart from one outlet, it was a little bit shocking. And even in the media day before, it was in the afternoon, and there were a few there, but not too many. And then on the Friday night, there were a little bit more, obviously, but not what we would have seen before. So from that point of it, I suppose that's maybe one negative of the weekend. Look, the other negative then, I suppose, is Peter Queally lost, James Gallagher lost. But that is MMA, you know? And it's funny because we're in Irish MMA where it's been almost nothing but good in terms of results, in terms of Irish cards. You know, we had Peter Queally getting the huge win against Ryan Scope. We had James Gallagher winning all these main events. Conor McGregor here headlining against Diego Brandao, getting a huge win on a night where all five, you know, Irish people, Gunny Nelson included as well, and that got the wins. And, you know, it was a fantastic night. And we've had those positive nights, those brilliant nights. We've seen, you know, people down through the years, the Cathal Pendreds and the Neil Series and Cage Warriors winning the belts. We've seen Ian Garry win the belt outside of Ireland and stuff. So Irish MMA, if you look at it, it's, you know, it has been a very, very lucky scene, I suppose. It's been a very, very what's the American word they use? Winning. What's it? Winningest. It's been one of the winningest scenes, I suppose, you could get in the world for such a small team. And I've said the word scene about 50 times, so I apologize. But it really has. It's been so. There's been so many good times. And when you have good times in MMA, it's going to lead to tough fights. Like James Gallagher has won all of his fights since Ricky Bandejas a few years ago. Peter Queally took the tough fight against Patricky the first time, won it, And then you're getting an even tougher fight against Patricky again the second time over 5 rounds with a belt on the line. When you're taking fights like those, when you're taking chances like those, when you're excelling yourself into big matchups like that, you're going to lose. You know, you might win, but you're going to lose too at some stage. MMA has no place to hide, and not just for, say, an up-and-comer like James Gallagher, not just someone like Peter Queally, who, you know, is not the best fighter in the world, is a good fighter. But for the best fighters in the world, there's no hiding place. Look at McGregor. He was the best fighter in the world. He ended up taking losses. You know, Colby Covington there on Saturday night lost. And there are very few. You know, okay, John Jones. Even John Jones is lost. You know, Khabib is the only one as well, but he's retired kind of early. But everyone, George St. Pierre, knocked out. You know, everyone. Francis Ngannou has lost. Stipe Miocic, Daniel Cormier, Demetrius Johnson. All the best. They all lose. Right, and the deflation, I suppose, on Friday night when 2 guys lost was as palpable, I suppose, as the adulation that they got as they walked into the cage. It was mad, because the adjustment in emotions between James Gallagher walking out and James Gallagher tapping was like something you could almost never see anywhere else in life, only in sport, and only in a cauldron like that. Oh, it really is, because like other sports don't end that quickly, you know, and don't end that comprehensively, and that, you know, when did James Gallagher, it was the start of the 3rd round, wasn't it? So literally 20 minutes, 22, 23 minutes before, the crowd were insane. Even in the middle of the fight, you know, 2 minutes before, they were probably insane. But as they walk out, and then just pure deflation, pure quietness, even like a little bit of respect for Patchy Mix, and then quietness after it as well. And then what happens? You know, Dolores O'Riordan comes on, the Cranberries come on, Peter Queally is walking out, and then raise the roof again, the level just shoots up, and he comes out. And then we've gone from loud to quiet to loud, and then what happens next? Peter Queally gets knocked out, and we've gone to quietness again. It was an insane scene, an incredible scene, a scene that's a scene again. It's almost impossible to describe. It's almost impossible to see anywhere else. But this is a test now, because what happens next? You know, I would like to see Irish MMA being kind of rewarded for the incredible atmosphere and the incredible fights that went on. These were, you know, there were still good fights. The Gallagher Biggs fight was a very good fight. Obviously, the big knockout in the main event, and Queally went out and he threw his shots in the second round. I wouldn't mind see. Look, Vincent Henderson just lost to Bryn Primus. Looks like Bryn Primus could be fighting for the title now. Or, you know, is it Usman or Magomedov in that way? I think it is. Anyway, I wouldn't mind seeing Vincent Henderson against Peter Queally, maybe in the main event here. James Gallagher, who's he going to fight? I think he needs to continue to fight people at the top level. Now, he's got there. We don't want to see an MVP situation where he rolls it back. Let's shoot. Look, if you lose your next fight, you lose your next fight. That's, if you win your next fight, you're vaulted back in there. I think that's the way James Gallagher needs to do. James Krause put it up on Instagram about that, talking about how, look, he took a chance. It didn't go for him. And look, it was a close fight up until it ended. I think, you know, I think the late takedown for James Gallagher kind of worked against him in the first round, and then there were lots of guillotines that were like, how do you score that? You know, is it effective grappling because he's in a guillotine, or is it not effective grappling because he's in a guillotine but he's not finishing him? It was one of those tough ones. It was a fun fight and a good fight, but I think, you know, looking forward, I suppose, from that, both guys and the Irish MMA landscape for Bellator needs to be nurtured, and now because now it's a very important time. You know, it's a very, very important big time, because it's grand when you're going in there and you have a title fight, you know, and you have a James Gallagher fight when he's fighting to get to a title fight. Maybe like if James Gallagher had won on Friday, you could absolutely see him fighting the winner of Pettis and Haraguchi. Now maybe he wouldn't, but there would have been talks that there could have been talks that, and it could have happened. I think everyone would agree with that if he had won. The next time, if James Gallagher wins, he won't be fighting for a title, more than likely. There will probably only be talk of it. Peter Queally won't be fighting for a world title. No, maybe Sinead Kavanagh wins next weekend, and then we have a different situation. We have a different thing. But I suppose we'll get to that in a second as well. So that's this next few months for Bellator. This next event for Bellator in Ireland is absolutely huge. Will it sell out? Will there be 9,000 people there? Will the same interest be there after losses? No, I think it will. I think there'll be a good interest. I wasn't as sure before the event, like how it was going to go and how the fans were going to react, and if people would just turn up because of the pandemic. But they did. They absolutely did. And I think it'll be very interesting to see how it looks going forward. But this weekend, inside the cage, the two big main event and co-main event fights ended in losses for Irish MMA, but you couldn't call that Bellator Dublin card a loss for Irish MMA because of the fans, because of how brilliant it was. Like, I think Patchy Mix and Patricky Pitbull, both kind of came out in the media afterwards and were like, they didn't necessarily say straight out, I enjoyed it or I'd like to fight here again. But I think if you ask both of them that straight question, they probably would say that, I think, because it's just incredible. Everyone that comes here and experiences it loves it. And as I think my friend Zane Simon said on Twitter the other day, it's a pity the UFC kind of gave up on this scene. And if Bellator do, I think it'd be a big mistake, even with the negative results from this weekend. But a fantastic event to be at, and fantastic to look forward to. Now, the two other fighters coming up next week, Sinead Kavanagh and Ian Garry, who fought at the weekend as well. Now, I'll obviously have my Bellator preview, so we'll talk more about Sinead Kavanagh. But what an opportunity for Irish MMA to bounce back in Bellator. I can't wait for that. It'll be absolutely huge. And if you haven't listened to my interview with Sinead here on Sherdog, please do. It's not for me. Her story is like no other person in Irish MMA. Not Conor McGregor, not Ian Garry, not James Gallagher, none of them. Her story is out of this world. It's just madness altogether. I think she had a son when she was 17. His father passed away, and then her aunt and uncle passed away in a car crash, and her mother kind of went off the rails. Sinead became homeless. While she was homeless, she won Irish National Boxing Championships. Crazy, insane story. You have to listen to it. It's unmissable, honestly. And that level of life lived, I suppose, going in to fight Chris Cyborg, just for that adversity to come through it, to survive it. What better preparation could you have to be put into the most adverse situation you possibly could be put into as a woman's 145 pounder outside of the UFC? There is none. And I'm really looking forward to that. But as I said, we will talk more about that. But Ian Garry as well. To wrap up, I suppose, the Irish MMA scene for this weekend. What a win for Ian Garry. He came out there and he took some shots early, and he got hurt, relatively hurt, but his nose got busted up and he was bleeding profusely, and it was a bad start for him. Make no mistake about that. But he settled, and I think if you watch from, around the midpoint of the round until obviously the finish with in the last second of the round, Ian Garry looked unbelievable. He looked really good. He looked slick. He looked smart. He looked defensively good, where he didn't look defensively good beforehand. But that's not Ian Garry. If you've watched Ian Garry before, he is a guy who has improved defensively over the years, and his offense is, you couldn't question that. It's unbelievable. His power, he's so slick. He's a beautiful jab, and he has all the shots on the feet and really good on the ground. He finishes on the ground as well. So he's never been at a UFC event before. The first UFC event he ever was at was him fighting on it. I don't think that was a good decision, to be honest. I think he probably should have gone to one, experienced it, and know what was coming. But it didn't matter. In the end, he got the win, and he ended up on the good side of it with a beautiful knockout, reminiscent of, I suppose, Conor McGregor versus Evan Bushinger from Cage Warriors back in the day. But Ian Garry, if you're to look worldwide and look for someone to be the next Conor McGregor, very hard to find one. Like, very hard to find someone who is going to be a pay-per-view draw, who's going to be an imperious fighter, who's going to win world championships, who's going to be fantastic. Worldwide, this is in the 7 billion people worldwide, or whatever it is. What about the 5.5 million people on the island of Ireland, or whatever it is? To find another one there is going to be very, 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 very tough. And I suppose, as an Irish MMA scene, I'll say the word again, not me, but other people are expecting it. They think it might be James Gallagher. They think it might be Paul Hughes. They think it might be, Kiefer Crosby or whoever else, John Mitchell, down through the years. But the one guy who it might be, if it's anyone, is Ian Garry. You know, he said afterwards, this is the takeover part 2. And if it is, it is. You know, we will see down through the next few years. We will see if the results go the right way. We'll see if his talk goes the right way. You know, he's changed gym as well. He's left Team KF, Chris Fields and Tom King's gym here in Ireland to go to Sanford MMA. We'll see if that works. We'll see if Sanford MMA works. He might go somewhere else. You know, hopefully it works out. He's in a great gym. It's one of the best gyms in the world without a shadow of a doubt. But things have changed for him. He's moved country. He's getting married, I think, in the new year, he said. He's in the UFC now, earning more money. Things change and things adjust. Now, that might make him better or it might not, but it is a big time for Ian Garry, and it is a big reputation that he has found himself having, and it'll take a lot to get to the level of McGregor. Now, as I said, he has the tools to do it. Whether he does it or not, we will see. But his display at the weekend, I don't think it was fully fully showing what Ian Garry actually is. You know, we saw Paddy Pimblett a few weeks ago and he kind of got rocked and then he ended up getting the big finish at the end. I think that kind of did show what Paddy Pimblett is. You know, he's had kind of a few deficiencies in his game down through the years. I don't think Ian Garry has those glaring deficiencies in his game whatsoever, but he showed an issue early, resolved that issue and got the finish. So it was absolutely fantastic. A really, really great win for Ian Garry, and his nickname is The Future, and the future for Ian Garry is going to be very, very interesting. It's going to be it's going to be fun to see. One or two names as well I just want to mention. Pedro Carvalho, who is a Portuguese fighter but trains in SPG. He talked to the media this week and he spoke really, really well about how proud he is to represent Irish MMA and fight over here. You know, you could argue that he's one of the best fighters in the world that's fighting out of Ireland at the moment. Okay, his results in his last two before Friday night didn't go great, but beating Daniel Weichel means something. You know, that's a very, very good win, and he's a very good fighter. And he's a guy, you know, he's a guy you'd like to listen to in an interview, you know. You'd like to listen to him in a scrum. You'd like to see him fight because he's an exciting fighter as well. So I have to mention Pedro. I have to mention Ciaran Clarke as well, who had a very tough fight and came through it and did very, very well. A tough-nosed guy who's had a tough upbringing, and he's a good fighter as well. And I want to mention Danni Neilan. She went 5-0 at the weekend. She called out Valerie Loreda afterwards. She is a 115 pounder, which is an issue because Bellator don't have the 115 pound division, but she said she's willing to go up to 125 to fight Loreda, and then, you know, maybe get to 7 or 8-0, and then we'll see what's next. But look, I'm sure she would love if Bellator had the 115 division or started it, but I think at 5-0, if she gets another few wins, I think she's good enough to go to the UFC. And you know, if Bellator division, as I mentioned, grand, but they don't. So the UFC is the destination for her, and I think she is a fighter who will have enough to get to that level, and we'll see where the world takes her. Then after that, you know, I suppose you can never tell whether someone can get to a rank level or a world level in terms of, you know, being a champion or being a top 5. But I do think she has the prospects of getting to the UFC and having a good career there as well. So those are just a few names to listen to from the weekend. We also, you know, we have Joe McColgan as the Cage Warriors champion and Paul Hughes as the interim champion. It's a very exciting time for Irish MMA. Ups and downs, but that's MMA. You know, that is MMA in a nutshell. There's going to be tough times, there's going to be great times, and even on the same night there's going to be great times and tough times. So right, that's my Irish MMA update. I'll do these pretty often. Hopefully there'll be more big Irish dates to come and big Irish events and big Irish fights, and I'll be here with my friends on Sherdog.com to cover it. Thanks everybody for watching. Tell a friend. We'll see you all next time. Good luck.